Joining me now is Mike Papantonio. He is an environmental attorney, lawyer whose firm has filed a class action lawsuit in 3 states on behalf of the shrimpers, fisheries, oystermen, and business owners. Mike, good to have you with us tonight.
Yeah,
I'm doing fine, and I appreciate what you're doing because this is going to have a domino effect on jobs in that region down there, unlike anything we have ever seen before. Where's the liability? Where's the culpability here? What's the call for the lawsuit?
You nailed the story perfectly in the beginning of this program. Deepwater Horizon had 2 trip devices to use in blowout catastrophes. Both of them failed because of either human error or defect. Now, here's what people don't know. BP didn't want to spend the money for a system. It was a fail-safe system, absolutely fail-safe. It's a device system that's used all over the world, except in the United States, because we give them a free pass in the United States.
What system is that, Mike? What system is that?
The system is called the acoustic switch system. It's a relay system that blows out the bottom of the catastrophe. In other words, it stops the oil exactly from the source. Now here's what's interesting. If BP has to do business in Norway, they have to use the switch. When they do it in the U.S., they don't have to use it. It happened because of this. During the Bush deregulation years, you had the Mineral Management Service that told companies like BP that, gee whiz, we have a new policy. It's the closed-door Dick Cheney policy. That Dick Cheney program allowed the industry to bypass safe systems like the acoustic switch, and there was no need to spend $500,000 with a company that was making $40 billion. It was a complete bypass of safety.
Okay, so Mike, are you telling our audience tonight that they were too cheap to spend $500,000 on the heels of record profits to put in an acoustic switch, which would have triggered the blowout preventer, which could have stopped all of this?
It's the most unreported part of this story out there, Ed. I don't know why the media is not talking about this, but that's what it came down to. Dick Cheney changed political policy with the energy industry. We all remember when he met behind closed doors with the industry. Yeah. This is one of the things that came out of there.
So they did all of this to save, I mean, I'm taken by this. They did all of this to save 500 grand? I mean, was this just a wealth of paperwork and a paper trail and safety precautions that they just didn't want to mess with? What is it?
When this story is told, it's going to look just like the other deregulatory stories where the Bush years, they deregulated this industry just like they did the drug industry, just like they did all parts of the environment, the SEC. You look at it, it's all deregulatory problem. Now, what we're stuck with is we're stuck with a problem where 20 million gallons of oil are spilling into the Gulf. There's no way to clean up. In a perfect world, Ed, think about this. In a perfect world, if everything goes perfectly, we're going to be able to get 20% of the oil from the Gulf. And what ends up happening is the rest of that crude it becomes catastrophic for an entire ecosystem.
I think the issue now is that the Senate, somebody in the Congress, has got to step forward and call for a hearing on this and have an oil engineer step forward and say, you know, we really didn't need this acoustic switch that was $500,000. I mean, this is the fundamental piece of your lawsuit, is it not?
Well, it's one of them, along with all the other negatives: failure to inspect, failure to train, failure to have a proper group of working people on. And you know what? The other part is that is their willingness to cover up the truth. As you said, starting this program, day 1 there was no problem. Day 2 there might be a problem. Day after day it grew and grew and grew. You know why? Because corporate thought that this thing could happen without anybody knowing that there was an oil spill. The longer they can keep it quiet, the better. And in the big picture, we have a Gulf that's still struggling with a $110 billion loss because of Katrina. Yeah. We have a dead zone that's already out there, Ed. The dead zone is as big as New Jersey, beyond this new problem.
Mike Papantonio, thanks for joining us tonight. And when you think about the impact of this, the tourism, who wants to go on an oily beach? Look at all the wildlife that's going to be affected. Look at the fisheries industry that's going to be affected. I mean, it's unbelievable. But remember, it really wasn't that big when it first started.
The effort to label the Gulf oil spill Obama's Katrina appears to have sputtered, even though, as we will explain, Mr. Obama's administration certainly did allow BP to bypass environmental requirements. But on our third story tonight, there's a growing pool of evidence, to say nothing of the oil, suggesting a far more apt name for this spill, Cheney's Katrina. First President Obama's part, it was his Interior Department under Secretary Ken Salazar, reports the Washington Post today, that last year exempted BP from doing a detailed analysis of the potential environmental impact of drilling at the Deepwater Horizon site. The analysis would have required BP to identify measures for reducing its environmental impact. As recently as April 9th, BP was lobbying to expand its exemptions. The exemption was granted based on 3 reviews of the area done by Interior's Minerals Management Service, MMS, that downplayed the prospect of a spill. So why Cheney's Katrina? His former company, Halliburton, led by his former protege, CEO David Lesar, did the cementing to seal the Deepwater well, a process families of the dead now claim led to the fatal blowout. Halliburton confirming it finished cementing only 20 hours before the damn thing blew. Just like Halliburton had just finished cementing this Australian well when it blew on August 21st of last year, causing what is now called the Montara spill. A government inquiry still underway there, but zeroing in on the cementing process. 3 years after the American MMS found that 18 out of 39 offshore blowouts since 1996 have been caused by bad cementing, a 20-year Halliburton cementer who admitted screwing up in the Montara spill testified this March about his Halliburton training. Quote, "Have you been taught in training or otherwise become aware that problems with cementing are the #1 cause of blowouts?" His answer, "No, I wasn't aware of that." Almost immediately after taking office, Vice President Cheney began meeting with more than 100 oil executives, compiling a wish list of things they wanted. One thing the industry did not want was mandatory acoustic switches, which can shut wells remotely when blowout preventers fail. The administration knew preventers fail because the MMS found hundreds of incidents in which they did, but it reversed a Clinton-era decision to require the, quote, essential acoustic backups, calling them too costly, and those faulty blowout preventers a fail-safe. And the MMS report downplaying the odds of a Deepwater spill. It was done back in 2007, signed off on by then-Director Randall Luthi, a Wyoming Republican who goes back almost 30 years with Dick Cheney to 1982 when he was an intern for Dick Cheney.
Might have some legs to it. It's the theory involving Halliburton. Can you explain to us that a little bit more?
This one actually is more than a theory. There's something to this. What their direct involvement was needs to be worked out still, but Congress is actually calling for them to turn over documents by May 7th and state precisely what their involvement in this was. We do know, based on their own press release, that they were the last people working on the rig about 20 hours before the explosion. So they are involved in some way that we can't discern yet, but they seem to be, perhaps at least negligent, and we can speculate if there's anything more to it than that, and I'm sure the web media will actually go ahead and do that in the days to come.
Real quickly, all these ideas, I mean, you said implausible. Are they really that implausible?
Well, look, like any conspiracy theory, by definition, it can't really be disproven entirely, And as I said, there's always a story behind a story. So we do have to, be open to understanding that what we're told as the official explanation of events may need to be deconstructed. But we should at least have some limits of credibility attached to our speculations. The North Korea story is based on one posting on a website that claims sources from the Kremlin had communicated this information in some manner with no verification whatsoever. It's as thin a conspiracy theory as I've ever come across. So that's the level of implausibility that we're talking about.
BP was using underwater sensors to try and track the flow of oil from that gushing well, but people in Alabama can tell them where the oil is gone.
The trouble now spreading far beyond Louisiana's coast. Alabama has been hit with its worst oil over the past 48 hours. That oil afflicting Orange Beach and others, coming up about 12 feet on those white sandy beaches. This is really a prime tourist area. Some of that oil 5 inches thick.
That's Fox's Steve Harrigan reporting from Grand Isle, Louisiana. A spokesperson for BP says the oil company is, quote, aware of the request from the federal government that it set aside billions of dollars for an escrow fund to pay for any claims from Gulf oil damage. President Obama wants such a fund to be overseen by an independent third party. Louisiana's treasurer says A fund like that should contain at least $5 billion.